Hello again, and welcome to session 2. I hope you enjoyed the last video on a brief introduction to human-centered design. Now, very quickly, we're going to talk about using human-centered design. In case you hadn't noticed in the last video, it's really very action-oriented, getting our ideas out there, just going out and exploring, and a sort of very learning by doing and a continuous process of that along the way. So we're going to get straight into doing it. And so what are some human-centered design research methods which may be useful for you and your work? So for insights, we're going to learn about 3 different methods, and you should aim to use at least 2 of these methods in your insight gathering. Human-centered design is very qualitative, and it's always useful to be able to cross-reference stories from one type of research with another type of research to make sure that we're understanding the nuance of what we're learning. So we're going to talk a bit about focus groups, we're going to talk about observations, and we're going to talk about interviews. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have experience in one, if not all 3 of these methods, but let's dive into some tips and some details about each one. So interviews. There's no better way to understand the hopes, desires, and aspirations of those you're designing for than by talking with them directly. Interviews should almost always be part of your research plan. They really give us that depth, those stories that really make us understand the kind of insight and the needs and the barriers that people are facing with very vivid, real life experience told in the first person by the people that we're designing for. And so why are they useful? On top of that, interviews help you to explain and better understand what people, health workers, communities, community leaders, caregivers, or district health staff, whoever you're engaging, think and feel. Hearing from them in their own words and what people think and feel is really the value and the lifeblood of human-centered design, because that's what we want to learn about, what we want to design for. Interviews provide us with a rich story rather than generalized statements, and stories are really easy to remember. They're really rich. They're very good at communicating those thoughts and those feelings that we want to understand. Interviews establish empathy with users and help to mitigate judgment through storytelling. This helps for you to develop solutions tailored around the needs of those you are speaking to. And interviews are a useful source of knowledge that you can transmit to your team. Typically, our brains are programmed to remember and recall stories, as I was just mentioning, which can then be acted upon. And it's really useful to have these rich stories and these people that we remember, because they stay with us throughout the process of designing for them and designing solutions. And these stories really help us to make sure that whatever we do and whatever decisions we make are learning and responding directly to the stories that we've heard. So some interview tips. Key tips for all of your interview methodologies. Conduct your interview in the person's space. You can learn a lot about a person's mindset, behavior, and lifestyle by talking with them where they live or work. So where they're comfortable, how are they moving around in the space, how are they using the space, can give us a lot of insight into their day-to-day lives. No more than 3 research team members should attend any single interview, so as not to overwhelm the interviewee. Obviously, we're calling it an interview, it is an interview, but we don't want the person that we're speaking with to feel, overly watched or interrogated. It's really a conversation. Each team member should have a clear role, an interviewer, obviously to lead the conversation, to establish that relationship with the person that you're learning with. A note taker, notes are incredibly important, and as well a photographer. So that would be your maximum 3rd team member, and that can be really useful to take pictures of the environment that they're in. Obviously get consent if they don't want to be photographed themselves. Those pictures of the kind of tools or objects that they use in their day-to-day lives, the environment can be really rich in understanding their day-to-day lives. Come prepared with a set of questions you'd like to ask. Start by asking broad questions about the person's life, values, and habits before asking more specific questions that relate directly to your challenge. So don't get specific too soon. That can be a bit overwhelming. You want to just sort of get to know a bit of a foundation, build a bit of a relationship, and then try to get those stories from people by asking very specific questions that are relevant to your research. Make sure to write down exactly what the person says, not what you think they might mean. So everyone has their own biases, and we take notes, and they are all going to be different based on what words we sort of pick up on, how we interpret things in the moment. We might get distracted, or it's really, really, really valuable to make sure you just get the exact words down. Quotes are really rich to bring to life how people are telling their stories. And we want to make sure that we have the exact data to then share amongst team. Everyone can interrogate and learn the exact insight that people are sharing. And so that's really, really valuable, not to interpret in the moment. What you hear is only one data point. Be sure to observe the person's body language and surroundings and see what you can learn from the context in which you're talking. Take pictures, provided you get permission first, as I was mentioning. Focus groups. So focus group discussions are a useful methodology to develop a quick understanding of a community's life, their dynamics, needs, and through a compelling look at how a larger set of people operate. So the best groups seek to hear everyone's voice, get diverse opinions, and are strategic about group makeup. And so why are they useful? You can hear and observe many people from the same group at once, noticing commonalities and differences in their experiences. You get a range of responses and diversity of information on the same topics and themes, and you can learn quickly what is viable and what is challenging within a community. So these are really good to sort of get it. If you don't know much about a community or who you're trying to design for, you can get a sort of quick sense of what's important through a focus group. Or if you do interviews first, you can then sort of test your learnings with a wider group of people. So focus groups aren't necessarily where you get those deep, rich stories like you do in one-to-one interviews, but you can get a general sense about what's happening in this environment, this context for the people that you're trying to engage. Tips for effective focus group discussions. Be strategic about who takes part in the group. If you want to learn something specific, ensure those closely linked to or who may influence this behavior are in the group, and make sure it's a safe space for them to contribute. If we're talking about a sensitive health topic, we might want to make sure that the group is smaller, or they're more aligned in their sort of characteristics, so they feel safe talking about specific challenges or experiences that they have. Be sensitive to social cultural norms. In some settings, it may not be appropriate to have a mixed group of men and women, or a female or male facilitator, to make sure that you're designing that space, that group conversation, in a way that really suits the people that you're trying to speak with. And ensure everybody in the group has the opportunity to speak. You can use tactics like card sorting to ensure that quieter people participate and louder people take up less time. It's also good to start off the focus group and let everyone go around and say hi and say their name. Take down people's names so that you can call on people for their contributions, and always make it safe for people to come in and maybe say something different to what the last person said, and make sure that everyone knows that their specific experience is the value that you're trying to get, rather than group agreement, which can be quite intimidating sometimes in a group for some people. And finally, observations. So observations are a way for you to listen with your eyes, placing yourself in an environment and observing people's behavior to understand their unmet needs. You should use observational methods when you need to understand people's broader context, things like social hierarchy, attitude, and experience with a service. And so what do they do? Why are they useful? Observations allow us to be open-ended instead of the closed, static list of questions that comprise surveys. Observing people in their environment allows for the unknown to be revealed and encourages deeper understanding. And this is harking back to our conversation yesterday, things like say, do, gaps. If we hear that people in a community are saying that this is why I don't do X, or this is why I do Y, the focus behaviors that we're looking at or services that we're trying to get people to use, if we observe the environment and actually people maybe are doing something else that conflicts with what they've told us in interviews, then we can sort of understand that say-do gap. So that's the next bullet point that I've stumbled into, closing the say-do gap. The things that people say and what people actually do are often not the same. Having a body of observational research can ensure that we are checking against this gap. Learning from the outliers, observational methods can allow us to go where quantitative data cannot, to the outliers and extremes that sometimes get hidden in bigger surveys or in quantitative data. By spending quality time with an outlier group, you can find out what the barriers are to accessing and or demanding immunization services or whatever services we're focusing on. So, going back to yesterday, those extreme user needs, the people who find it hardest to engage in certain services or behaviors, we often might find the real source of insight that we need to design something that will suit everyone. So make sure you can spend some time with people who are in this group. Tips for observation. So look for things that prompt behavior We're looking at behavior, but what happened just before, what happened along the way that made them change tact. There are many behavioral triggers in people's environment, from explicit signs to the distance of items from a doorway. Observe both obvious and less obvious prompts that are influence behavior. So it's not just the person, but it's very much the environment that they're in that is influencing them. So we want to make sure we're writing down as many notes as possible. Look for adaptations. Adaptations are workarounds that people come up with to make a product or system work better. They point unmet needs in an environment. So it could be something as simple as maybe there's a notice board in a health center and people use it to write updates, but the pen always falls on the floor. So somebody's used a bit of blue tack to put it on the wall, so it's always next to the noteboard. Things just like very small things that people are trying to fix in their own way for a problem that they might have. Those kind of inventions that people come up with are often very rich in understanding what the challenges that people facing are. Look for what people care about. What do people surround themselves with? So what kind of things matter to them? What are they carrying with them? What's in their environment? Look for body language. People smile when they're happy and slouch when they're tired, generally speaking. So these body cues can indicate the emotions that people are feeling in a given environment. How are people feeling? Can give us a lot of understanding about, what they're doing and how they're experiencing it at that point in time. And look for patterns. So pay attention when people repeat something. You might uncover themes for routines, both of which can point to underlying needs or values. What are they prioritizing? What are they repeatedly doing? Could give us a lot of insight into people's day-to-day lives. And look for the unexpected. So try and notice things that stand out or are unique in a given environment. So it's always good to do observations in pairs because people always observe different things. So, then afterwards you can cross-reference your notes and say, oh, you even noticed something that I didn't. And it could be really interesting to see the different things that people notice and observe and what they can sort of tell us together. So research outputs. We always want to sit with our data. We probably have lots and lots of paper and notes. So once you've spoken to people in the field, you'll need to analyze the insights you've collected into ways that other people can understand, and also for you to understand. It's also important to communicate your findings in a way that represent and help share people's experiences. So you're going to learn about 2 tools to help analyze data. So these are user journey maps and personas. You may have come across these before, you may not, and that's absolutely fine. And so you might want to use these tools when you're sharing insights with your groups next time. And I'll talk a little bit about what each of these does. So user journey maps. A user journey map is a way of organizing insights along the journey to immunization or the journey to using a service that you are designing. This can provide insight into when and why barriers emerge and can quickly lead to focused strategic interventions that have a high chance of success, because we're really pinning down at what point do they fail to complete a task or complete a service. And then we can be very strategic about where we design our interventions. So look at the example on the right. The columns from the left to the right it reflect different stages of a parent's journey to immunization with their child. So we want to understand how participants feel at every step of the journey, and if they haven't completed the journey, when and why they stopped. Other stages may give us clues as well. So sometimes there are additional steps that people add in that we might not know about before we go and talk to people. So along the top, we have the orange, yellow, and green boxes. So the orange is sort of preparing to access a service or do a health behavior. And then the yellow boxes, we have the sort of engagement. How do people actually experience using the service? And then afterwards, how do they feel afterwards? And so you might find in your research that actually nobody completes the journey that you're focusing on because there's a really big barrier in the middle, or you might find at the end that people are feeling actually that didn't really go very well. Maybe I won't use this service again. Or maybe at the very beginning, the information is so confusing, they can't even make a decision to start using your service or product. So this is why journey maps can be really, really helpful to understand what's actually happening. So along the top, you line out the different steps that you think people are taking to access your journey. And you also want to make sure to understand whether your research is informing you about extra steps or missed steps that can give you a lot of insight into what's actually happening. And what we do at each of these steps is along the left-hand side, we parse out all the data that we've given so that we understand the full picture of what's happening. So in the first stage, finding out about child health immunization. So where do they look for information and who do they trust? So are they asking family members, friends? Do they like to go to trusted notice boards, trusted websites, trusted institutions for information? Who do they trust to make a decision? It's going to be really useful information for us to gather. How do they feel about it? So do they feel confident in making this decision? Do they feel confident about getting the information? Do they not get the information they get very easily? So that +2, +1, 0, -1, -2 is just a simple spectrum of +2 is obviously very positive, 0 is neutral, and -2 is actually don't feel great. I feel pretty negative about this. This is actually quite hard. I don't trust anyone. I hear that immunization is important for my child, but I have no idea who to turn to, so it's very stressful. So we might want to make a note of that. What obstacles are making it hard? So maybe they don't have access to the internet, or they don't have access to an institution, or a health center is really far away to travel to just to get information. So this step's quite hard. There might be lots of different reasons why this stage is hard. And so what do they do next? So maybe they did find information that they trust, and so they're confident to move on to the next step and make a plan. Or maybe they're like, well, maybe I'll just go and have an appointment, or maybe I'll just not really bother. I'm not too sure what to do next. So how do the steps kind of end can help us understand how they feel moving into the next step. And so if we parse out the information like this at every step of the journey, then we're going to get some really rich information as to how people are feeling along the way, and what are the big barriers and what are the big opportunities for us to design for. So here you can see that the journey wasn't completed due to a poor experience at the health clinic. The waiting room was so busy, full, and unkempt, they left after an hour wait before they were seen by a healthcare worker. So some other insights along the way: there were no books or toys for children to keep occupied. Sick children were mixed with healthy children, which made the parents feel really uncomfortable. And the clinic didn't look clean, so it wasn't a nice place to wait. And so it might be that parents don't actually mind waiting if it was a nice place to be, or if they get given a ticket saying come back in 2 hours. So we have this really interesting information here. We know that people are actually getting to the clinic, and where we need to intervene is at this point where people drop off the journey. So what would make a big difference? Is it just telling people how long it's going to be, just a tidier waiting room? And so this is the kind of stuff that we can start thinking about in terms of ideas. And then we want to go back to people and say, actually, is this what you need, or something else what you need, or how does solving this problem going to work for the people that we're trying to solve it for? But so far you can see very clearly that people are getting to the health clinic and then not continuing. And actually people start off this journey very confidently, and it slowly and slowly deteriorates. So you want to work at how to make it more consistently positive. Personas. Personas are fictional profiles based on real people, used to understand their needs, aspirations, abilities, limitations, and character traits of different users. Personas can help to keep us focused on realistic portraits of the people we want to reach, making sure that the solutions we design have real people at the center. As I was saying before, yesterday, these tools really help us to keep these needs and behaviors at the forefront of our decision making from beginning to end. So right along the end of a project, and it's been a long time since we spoke to anyone, we want to have a really useful way of diving right back into the real needs and the real challenges that people are facing every day. You may develop a persona of a low literate mother or of a working mother. You may develop a persona of a mother-in-law or a healthcare worker. Personas should be representative of the kind of people you speak to in the field. So we say representative because we want to protect people's identity, but we do need to use real data in these personas to make sure that we're actually going to solve for real needs and challenges. How to fill it out. So use the information you have from the research. If you met two similar women, you can combine them into one persona so that you've got a really rich portrait of what this kind of needs profile is and what you need to design for. And you can give that person a name, so you can talk about them easily with your collaborators, talk about them with your team, and make sure that they stay at the forefront of all your conversations. For another woman who may live in a different region or have different beliefs, may have a different routine or economic background, create another one. And then you know that you've got another set of needs, another kind of profile that you need to design for, who may have very different challenges, but they both need to be able to use your service or product or solution. So we need to make a few of these to make sure that all the spectrum of needs are representative of people that we're actually going to try and design for and make sure that our solution works for them. So here you can see an example of a persona. It's an anonymous representation of someone that somebody's met in the field. We can see that she has a very busy day and might not have any time to think about accessing health services. Some other insights: Fatima wants the best for her kids, but doesn't have a lot of time to do more than feed them well. So she knows that nutrition is really important. She doesn't know anyone who has immunized her child and doesn't know where to find out about it. She wants real life testimony. That would be the most important, decision-making input that she would need to make a decision. She understands that food and sleep are important for her children's health and well-being. So Fatima is based on a real woman. Her life is isolated from health information and services, and she is very poor and busy. This is how she differs to other women and other personas. So we know that this profile is based on someone that we've met, real needs, real challenges, and real desires in terms of accessing health information. And so we can use these profiles to help us design for these challenges throughout the process of making solutions. Okay, insights rapid practice. So you're going to interview your colleague. This is an optional exercise, but I think it'll really bring to life some of the things that I've been speaking about. But you're going to interview your colleague about the last holiday they took, or even their weekend plans, whatever they did recently. In advance, prepare the questions that you want to ask. So interview practice, as well as the tips that I shared earlier, you want to write 10 questions to find out about their last holiday. Ask open-ended questions like who, what, where, when, why, and how. That will really help you bring out the stories that will give you that rich insight about what actually happened. What were their challenges? What were their successes? You don't want to ask questions that are just yes, no answers. It won't really give you much information to design for. Give them time to respond. So don't rush them if they need a time to think about what actually happened. It might be a while ago. You don't want to give them a lot of pressure. You want them to be able to draw on their real experiences. If they don't understand the question, take a moment to consider what you're trying to learn and then rephrase. Paraphrase their answers back to them to give them a chance to clarify if needed. Saying things like, so what I heard is this happened. And then they can say, yes, that's what happened. And it might draw out a bit more information. Or if you weren't quite right, they can go on to explain it more fully. And prepare to write down the responses word for word. Remember, I said that was very important to make sure that whenever you analyze information, we're talking about the real data that you heard. And so reflecting on the interviews that you've just carried out, if you have done them, I think it would be very valuable. How well do you understand the experience of the interviewee's holiday? Do you feel like you know everything about it? Do you still have more questions? What other questions would you like to ask? Did you find out anything surprising? Sometimes surprises can give us real insight into what would improve somebody's holiday. How much information did you get from the interview? Was it enough? Do you feel like you'd like to cross-reference it with some other form of research? Did you notice their body language when the interviewee was talking? Did they close up when they talked about something really stressful, like the train was delayed? Or did they sort of relax when they were recalling, oh, we had a really nice meal at my aunt's house? How did their body react to the story that they were saying? What quotes have you written down that provide rich insight into the experience of their holiday? And so with this in mind, if you were to design this person a holiday, how well do you now understand their hopes, desires, and aspirations? So try and draw out of the notes that you've written down what means something to them. What do they hope to experience in their lives? What do they want to do? What do they want to achieve when they do take time off work, when they spend time with their family, or whatever they like to do on holiday? What have you really understood about their needs and hopes that will help you design a perfect holiday for them? And so that is that. Congratulations, you have successfully completed Module 1. You're going on to Module 2 now, designing powerful health promotion programs. And I hope the things that you've learned in this video and the last video will help you do that. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing you soon.